So, yeah, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm loving it. Hi, Terry. How are you?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Doing well. I'm glad you could join us. That's awesome.
Me too. Me too.
So we're going to get started. I am recording and I'm excited that you guys are here. We got a small group today, but that's okay. I put out that, what do you call it? That little, help me out guys. What is that called?
The post?
The post that had to do with the, like rate, the time and,
Yes.
what would be best for everybody. So I picked today because I thought, hey, everybody said Monday and between 3 and 5. So hopefully those of you that are watching on the playback, we'd love for you to be here. This is going to be so important for all of us because really the goal wasn't to hearing from me because I really want to learn from all of you guys. So I am excited to unpack this with you guys. Please, I'm going to put everybody on mute just because if there is some background noise, no big deal. It'll be muted for the recording. But also, if you have something to add, take yourself off of mute. I'll see your microphone go off mute, and please add away. So I'm picking up at the end of Commitment 1. I know last week, we skipped last week, month end, a lot of things going on, but we are getting back into this. So we're going to get into Commitment number 2 as well today. So I wanted to circle back a little bit with Commitment 1. And again, love to hear your thoughts. So please stop me anytime. But the first thing that really caught my eye is just in recapping Commitment 1. The first step, and this is from page 53, the first step into taking responsibility is to shifting from believing that the world should be a particular way to believing that the world just shows up. I think that's important for me when I read it is because I think my filter, and blink at me if this is you too, is every time something doesn't happen according to this guy's plan, it's the wrong way. And so if it's the wrong way, typically I'm looking for someone to blame. I'm looking to figure out whose fault it is. And what I'm realizing is when I start to think that way, it gives me the ability to go, where are you? Right? To ask the question of where are you? So we talked about this, I believe, last time we talked about it, but he talks about on page 53, there is a way that you can boost the shift with the third step, which is what if it's actually for us? And so it's the ability to see what's happening and how it could be benefiting you. What is happening in the world around you, your little slice of the world, how you can learn from it. And so that perspective for me is very helpful. It doesn't, and I love this part, it's not about never being below the line. It's just knowing where you are. It's being able to shift, and we're going to get into the shift and drift model. But it gives me the ability to know where I am. It says from this perspective on the bottom of page 53, we can feel gratitude for whatever is occurring in our life, greasing the wheels of learning, curiosity, and wonder. So yeah, that was really helpful for me. It always is as I reread these sections. I'm taking this commitment seriously, and how I do so is this phrase on page 54. He says, I commit to supporting others to taking full responsibility for those lives, for their lives. And I think part of this for me was we talked about the hero, the coach, the villain, right? And I think part of this that we talked about this a couple of weeks ago was that hero almost seems like something that's not such a bad thing, but in reality, it prevents people from taking radical responsibility for their life, and thus robbing them of the experience, right, of being responsible for the actions that they have, right? And so I think that learning is really the key in not taking that lesson away, not trying to minimize what's happening. It's not to say that we're not going to help people if they're asking for help, but I think part of it is helping them to realize it's their responsibility to decide what they're going to do from here going forward. Um, so, couple things I wanted to point out. And again, if you have something on these pages that stood out for you, please just take yourself off of mute and share with us what you have. On the bottom of page 54, it's talking about the commitment in action. And he says, now when situation arise, formerly known as problems, crisis, and issues, the standard response of leadership of this company, Athletico, is, that's interesting. What can we learn from this? I think part of this commitment and taking radical responsibility is deciding that not everything that is happening in the world around us is something that necessarily is a problem, but it's something that we can learn from. Whether it's something that had a hand in creating, or how we're going to respond to it differently than we have in the past. How can we learn from the things that are happening around us in this world? Even things that we didn't create, right? Think of 2020. Wow, lots of things there that you could say, wow, I didn't have a hand in creating any of it. But part of what I've learned is the fact that there was ways that I was responding to the things that were going on last year that weren't healthy, right? That caused me to start blaming other people, other groups, other things, as opposed to just saying, I don't like what's happening, but I can take responsibility within my own family and my own community and my own circle and start to change the way that I'm responding. One of the things I like to share this because my kids get a kick out of it, which is when I first learned about what was happening last year, I changed the way that I was. So my typical way of dealing with life former to COVID was I was a germaphobe. And so, meaning not a germaphobe, but I guess the best way to say it is I was always cognizant of making sure my hands were clean, right? Because of the work that I do in the fire service. And so that was a habit that I learned long ago. Well, part of it that started to change for me was when people were telling me, oh, if you don't do this and you don't do that, you could be doing something, that I actually started to change my behavior because I was like, well, hey, wait a minute. I've done a pretty good job. So now if you're telling me I have to do this, then maybe you're trying to control me, right? Maybe you're trying to say this or that. And I started to take away the very things that are helpful and healthy things to do. And so when I started looking at this, I go, wow, that's interesting. Like my response to how I felt about what was being said changed. I allowed to change my course or my way of normally protecting myself from other diseases, just because I was upset about what some people were saying about wearing masks or washing your hands or whatever it was. And so I felt like, oh, I'm going to be a rebel. I'm going to go against this thing that I've always been doing. And how silly it was, because science is always science. And so when I had some time to kind of consider, like, what was my response in all of the discomfort that I was feeling, I had to realize, I have to continue to do the same things that are always protecting me, regardless of how I feel about what's changing in our world. And so I think that story kind of for me help for me to see, I started to drift in this below the level of below the line mindset because I felt like it was my way of kind of challenging what people were saying about certain things. So I don't want to get into the specifics or all that stuff because I know those things are very controversial and that's not the point of my story. It was just to kind of share what my own kind of thought processes around how I started to change my way of thinking because of something that was happening that was uncomfortable for me. So on page 54, the second part of commitment one is I commit to supporting others to taking full responsibility. We talked about that. And so when we move away from blaming and criticizing and living in victim, villain, hero mode, we naturally invite others to do the same. So it's almost this thought of like, as people start to see us do those things, they start to emulate what we're doing. And so I think a lot of what we do as health coaches is just that. We start to change the trajectory of health, whether it's healthy body, healthy mind, or healthy finances within our own circle of influence. And then as we start to incorporate other people in and around us, whether they're clients or other coaches, they start to make those shifts as well because they experience us differently, right? As the challenges in their life. start to happen, and we get to speak into those things. Let's turn to on page 55. He starts to talk about the drift, and the drift is really about the slide into blame, criticism, and defensiveness, the wanting to be right. Okay, so this is your opportunity. I really want to hear from you. The wanting to be right. How many of you, as you're reading this, just felt like, holy cow, is he talking to me right now? Like, did he have me in mind with the need to want to be right? I'd like to hear from some of you about how this has been challenging for you to think about this, or even where you've kind of started to learn something and maybe put some different things into practice.
Okay, well, Tim, for me, I think what's difficult for me was my whole military career, and especially once I put on them anchors, the chief was never wrong. We were always right. I was taught to be right. I was trained to never be wrong. So for me to get into this, it's hard. It's hard for me to shift. Like it says, most people drift, but not everybody shifts. Okay. So for me, this is going to be a tough one because I've gone the last, 10, 12 years of never being wrong. So for someone like me, how am I able to overcome that? If that's all I know, or that's all I've been taught. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I think part of it is like, I think we all kind of put that on ourselves, like we have to be right. And I totally get what you're saying. I think one of the things that he makes a connection to is that if you're always the smartest person in the room, how do you ever learn? How do you ever grow? How do you ever teach other people to start to co-create if you have to be right? And I think for me, I don't know if this is true for any of you, but part of it is like what you end up doing is defending why you're right, as opposed to really hearing other people and their points of view and how you can go into that situation. And I love the illustration he talks about a little bit later. It may be in the next chapter, it is, where he talks about the fact that when you're wanting to be right, it's really about just defending your ego. Like we're going to defend that thing, that ego, like if our life depended on it. And so the question that I have to ask myself in being right is like, there's nothing to defend if it's truth. So he uses the example, and we're going to get to here in the second commitment, of 2 + 2 = 4. If someone is arguing with you about if you state a fact and they say, well, that's not true, typically we don't put up a big fight, right? Because we know that something that's true, that it's like, okay, well, if they don't understand the basics math, and that's okay. That's not really my issue. But the reality is when it's an opinion or something that isn't concrete, like 2 + 2, then there's really nothing to defend, right? And so it's learning to taking that approach in conversations, because there really is also how people are experiencing life. And so their point of view about what's happening in life, what happened in 2020, there's nothing really to debate, because it's really how they experience life, right? It's what they're using to filter life through, whether it's news or newspapers or articles or their friends or family or their coworkers. And so it's being able to experience people and learning from them gives us the ability, one, to connect with people. And we don't have to go to the drama triangle, which really, if you look at it, there's no benefit of being there. I don't know about you. Anyone else on that need to be right?
I'll speak, Tim. And I know I've spoken on this before in this, and he's visiting a lot of common themes, but this is something I deal with big. Like, I think my whole life, I was blessed where I learned quickly and I had success early on, like straight A student, etc. So I got comfortable in that, like I was right in what I was doing. And then as I grow older with life and responsibilities and a relationship, um, I'm finding sometimes I'm still hanging on to, like, I need to be right. Like I always know the answer. People come to me for the answer, or I was used to that. success in the past, and I'm learning that in a relationship, and especially a marriage, like um it's not about you anymore. It's about letting that go, and like I think the book brings up very clearly like a lot of drama, like he says on page 53, all drama in leadership and in life, like what I'm talking about more in life and relationships is caused by the need to be right. So when yes, he says something to me and I don't agree with it, I'm defending my vision of what's right, and I'm holding onto it so tight that I'm willing to go to battle, verbal battle with her, and argue back, and it gets us nowhere. But now that I'm just increasing my self-awareness and finding myself like, hey, maybe she has a different perspective, and what do I have to learn from her perspective? And I know like I'm still working on that, and she could definitely tell you that it's a work in progress still, but at least it's a step in the right direction. It's a skill set or an awareness that I didn't really think about before until reading Dr. A's books and this book that highlights some of those things.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think one of the biggest benefits to this book is definitely for relationships, like especially marriages, right? Like just think about the number one breakdown for most relationships is communication, right? It's communication is a lot of it is listening, right? And listening doesn't mean that you have to agree with what somebody says, but part of it is just being able to understand what they're saying. Like, tell me more. I need to understand more, right? It's not about I'm listening to defend. It may just be listening to hear where they are. And sometimes in listening to what somebody's saying, we get to hear the heart of what's really going on, right? They may be in the drama triangle, they may be below the line, but part of it, remember, this skill is about knowing where we are, right? And so if we're not going below and somebody else is, it gives them the ability to start to see, look, oh, they're not arguing with me, right? They're just listening, right? Maybe where I am is below the line, right? Maybe what I'm doing is not, right? And so giving them the opportunity, but also giving ourselves the ability not to engage our ego helps us from going below the line. So that was perfect. Thank you, Chris. We're going to jump ahead to commitment two. Commitment two is learning through curiosity. So I think the first part that I wanted to touch on here was just the first sentence on page 61, which is I commit to growing in self-awareness. Wow, this is a tough skill, growing in self-awareness. The benefits I think we all realize, but I think part of it is being able to grab that mirror, not to show other people where they are, but to turn it around so we can see where we are, right? To being able to tell ourselves the truth about where we are is the first step in self-awareness. I commit to regarding every interaction as an opportunity to learn. Learn so much about somebody else, how they're experiencing you, how they're experiencing life. With a curiosity, growth mindset, I think, is really the commitment, right? That you're looking to grow and be more curious about why people think the way they think about how they've experienced you. I think most of the time we just assume what we know, what they're thinking or what they're going to, how they're going to respond. And so we just start reacting as opposed to just learning and listening, so that we can understand at least what they're feeling. And it's their responsibility to process, but at least our responsibility is to understand where they're coming from. And what he says here, obviously, as you can see, is that that's a path to rapid learning, right? And so that makes sense to me. The third thing here is just the below the line. I commit to being right and to seeing the situation as something that is happening to me, right? We learned that to me. The shift is to by me, right? That's the first commitment, right? I commit to being defensive, especially when I am certain that I am right. And I think that's the key word, is certain. I think anytime you're dealing with human beings, I don't know, there's not much certainty, right? Because we all can look at something or hear something on the news and everyone sees or hears something a little bit different. So I think part of it, it has to do with our own confirmation biases. It has to do with how we're already experiencing life, how we grew up, what we learned, what kind of programming we had is from our parents and from all the influences in college and all those things. So I think part of it is just understanding people and realizing it's not about us trying to show someone else that they're wrong and that we're right. It's that we're learning, right? Because we all know that we can't change another adult's mind, right? The only person that we can change is us, right? Is our own mind and the way that we think. Any thoughts on that in that first section of the commitment to learning through curiosity before I move on here?
I could chime in here. Sorry, I'm on the road, so there might be a lot of background noise, but I love how it's just a positive thing, because a lot of times not knowing the answer might feel like weakness in our culture. And I like that they use the word curiosity and make it like a positive, playful thing. And they talk about a kid and just having like that wonder about you when something's different than you were expecting. So I really liked that part for sure. It's not weakness that we don't know the answer. Maybe somebody else's perspective could be just as right as ours from their own vantage point. So
Yeah,
I thought that
that
was
was
good.
well said. Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point, Carrie, I think that's really what it's about. I think that's what he's saying, is that as we're interacting with other people, when we come in with our own filters, we come in with our own biases. And I think really the goal with people is connecting with them authentically. If you can connect with somebody authentically, you build trust. If you build trust, then guess what? Then you may have the opportunity to share your experience with them, and thus they may or may not they change the way that they think about X, Y, or Z. Not that that's our intention, but think about, or you may be able to share in their perspective in the way that you thought of something being right or wrong may change based on your learning from somebody else, your curiosity in how somebody else sees the world. I think that's so important, especially as leaders, right? As leaders in our lives, we have the opportunity to connect with other people authentically and build trust, because at the end of the day, that's really all that we're left with, right? Is our relationships, right? And being successful in them means that we have to approach them with that curiosity lens. On page 61, he talks about 4 competencies that trump all the other ones in terms of their greatest predictor of sustained success. So here goes. The first 2 are really what he talks about. The first 2 address internal relationships, right? Just what Carrie was talking about, what all of us have really, Chris and Yessie have been talking about as well. Self-awareness, again, and learning agility. Those two are the top 2 areas to address in terms of internal relationships. So he starts to get into self-awareness and learning agility are what this commitment that we're going to be working on in the next few weeks, or the next week, is really about. I love this story that he talks about with Sarah. When I first heard it, I read this book, or I shouldn't say read it, but I listened to it on a podcast. And when I read this story, it was just so interesting to me that somebody would go to a leadership conference and be reading the same material and yet act in a way that is almost like flies in the face of the training. But in reality, when I look at it, so many times in life, I see myself in this story where Sarah, right? It's easy for us to see other people and where they're struggling, but it's so hard to have that lens of self-awareness so clear, pointed at us. And so it's easy to see why she was seething with anger, right? Because the fact is that she had no intention on creating any more self-awareness about where she was. And I think for me, that's why this group is so important to me, because I want to develop that. And I know that in community is where we start to develop that lens more greater. So when I first read this story about Sarah, it almost shocked me that she left the group, right? And yet in our world, people like Sarah are not that much different than us. They can be successful in the world. In fact, there's a lot of companies that will put these people in charge of organizations and groups of people because they know how to get things done. And it doesn't really matter what they think other people think of them, right? But I want you to see really what the difference here is. It's really not about dollars and cents, but yet again, it is. Because if you can teach somebody else to fish, if you can teach somebody else how to to grow as leaders within their slice of that organization, or in your family, or in the people that you do life with, think of how they win on so many different levels. And so that was kind of what I saw as that interesting story with Sarah, to me, was about. It was about really the central core of unconscious people is about one being right. And so for me, anytime I start to feel like, okay, I'm right about this, I'm digging my heels in, it gives me the ability to know where I am, because I've already identified being right is the cue for me to go, okay, you got a problem here. You need to walk away. You need to take a minute. You need to use stop, challenge, choose. You need to start breathing, because you've already identified that that need to be right is the catalyst for things to go south. Does that make sense? So it's all, here's the cool thing though. If you're feeling that way, or if you felt that way, it's okay, because it is hardwired in us. And so part of this is not about arriving to a place where you never feel that way or think that way, but it's that you start to identify it as a place to go, okay, I'm drifting. And I love the illustration. I don't know that we'll have time to get there, but the illustration on page 68 that talks about something happens, right? Somebody says something, something happens in life, and we start to feel the drift. And maybe it's about being right in a conversation. And you have a choice. Am I going to drift down to the drama triangle where I'm going to start villainizing, blaming, shaming? It's your fault, finding fault in somebody else, right? Trying to be the hero. Well, okay, I'll clean it up for you. I should have done this, right? Not your responsibility, but we're going to take it, right? I'm trying to be the hero, right? Or the victim, any one of those roles, they don't serve us, right? They always lead to more and more toxic relationships and toxic fear. But the ability to, when you recognize the drift, to be able to start the shift. And the shift always starts with taking accountability. It always starts with, even before that, I would say, walking away, taking a breath. I need a few seconds before I respond. Using stop, challenge, choose to think about what's most important in an interaction, right? Is it really about being right? Or is it really about being curious to why they think the way they think, and just hearing them and understanding, like, what they say isn't going to hurt me, right? It's just their opinion. It's just how they feel. It's really playing the role of the observer. Can I just understand who they are without being connected to what they're saying, right? Can I have the ability just to experience where they are in this situation and not have to take it personally, even if it feels personal, even if they're blaming you, right? You can see where they are, and you can go, oh my gosh, they see me as the villain. They don't see where they are in this. Okay, that's okay. Wow, I see this isn't about me now, and I don't have to take it personally. Now I can just let them be where they are, and when they decide to move from the drama triangle to start to see how life, they could start by taking responsibility for their own actions, how they can be where they are. I don't have to join them, right? I've joined people many a times, and it's never gotten me anywhere. But I love the freedom of practicing not going there with somebody else either, right? So that need to be right was, at least for me, I don't know about you guys, that was a huge reminder for me that fighting to be right, wanting to be right, proving to be right is just a wasted amount of time. And that need to defend, I think our need to be right is also that cue for us that we can start to see. The last thing I wanted to end on, because I know our time is up, is on page 66, and I'll leave us with this unless you guys have something you'd like to add. So please let me know. And
Yes.
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add to the Sarah part. When I was listening to the audio, I was like, holy moly. I even like missed my exit. I'm like, I think I'm Sarah. And hearing her, like, like you said, seeing it from a different perspective, like, Sarah, I was like, no, I think I heard Yessie. So it really woke me up, and it made me realize, wow, am I being unconscious? Like, I'm just living my life like this. And I could see how it plays a role with like kids, family, friends. And I was like, wow. So I just wanted to add to that because I know maybe somebody's gonna watch this later, but that was definitely me, and I can own up to that, and I'm not afraid to own up to it. When I came home, I was like, babe, that Sarah girl in the book, that's your wife. Holy moly! Like I need some work to do, and so I think it just feels good that this book has really woken me up, and I use the Stop, Challenge, and Choose now, and it kind of like I don't know. I guess you could say now using Stop, Challenge, and Choose, I relate to that Sarah girl, but I say yesy girl because of course that was me. But I'm using Stop, Challenge, and Choose now more effectively, I guess you could say, after reading the story about Sarah. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that
And
out.
then and the guy below the line comes in and says, "Well, I want to fix it."
Right?
Yeah, we're opposites on that.
No, and then I'll drag her back, and she's like, "I'm trying to be."
I'm
above
trying
the
to
line,"
walk
and-
away. I'm
yeah.
trying to use Stop, Challenge, and
Yeah.
Choose here. Help me out.
And I'll reel her in, like, wait, I want to hero this, but no,
Yeah.
at least we're like learning.
Yeah, we definitely are.
Yeah, I commend you guys because it's tough. I mean, marriage is probably one of the toughest relationships, probably the, and I think part of it is like it's a process. You know, it's the unbecoming in order to become some different people, and I think that's why I'm on this journey too. Is I want better for my kids. Like the first half, not so good, right? Meaning like the things that I did, the way that I responded to the circumstances of life and family, not so good, right? But I have the ability to change the course from here for my grandkids, for my children, young adult children, that they get to see something different, and I get to be responsible for my part, and Rachel's doing her part. And so that's really the cool thing. And I wanted to just this part right here, and I think we're good. Is when we go below the line. This is on page 66. When we go below the line, the ego is fighting for survival, and we become firmly entrenched in the scarcity belief. There isn't enough love, time, money, energy, security, control, and approval. The opposite, above the line, is opening to the big game of learning and growing. And we trust ourselves or our source. And so that's the difference. And I think that's the part that, for me, that I'm practicing realizing what it really is, like identifying what that is, so that I have the ability to see what the benefit of being above the line is that it could be a fun game, right? That this whole experience of life could be fun and learning, not about being right, but about learning. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time. I'm going to be posting our time here in just a moment and leading the way. And I encourage anyone that's watching it on a playback, please join us live. I'll be posting our time for next week soon. Take care, everybody. Good night.